Welcome to Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group. And I'm Jeff Nugent and wanted to tell you about a great session we have today. And I'm so excited because it's once again a very important one to create success in a contingent workforce program. And I have the perfect expert on Ask the Expert today. So, the topic of the day is perspectives and the power and importance of perspectives, of gaining perspective of all the parties within a contingent workforce ecosystem, and why Meg is the perfect person to talk about this is her bio is extensive. She's got over 25 years of experience in this industry, but in each of the perspectives of the ecosystem, be it from a staffing side, working on the client and owning the program from a client perspective or the buy side. She's worked at MSPs, and currently she's the SVP of Tandym Managed Services Group. And so, the perspective she can bring to the table in this discussion is unbelievable. So, Meg, thank you so much for
You for having
taking your
me.
time and
Appreciate it.
taking the time out of your busy day to talk to me about this. And I think, we had kind of an earlier conversation on different topics, but this is a very unique one and it's not talked about, but it needs to be because in our programs, there's so many moving parts and different perspectives. And if you don't have the other key components or the vendors or partners you're working with perspectives, there may be conflicts. And that's the worst thing you could have in a program. So thank you again for.
Absolutely. Really, really happy to be here. Thank you.
So, what is having a perspective? And I know that's a grandiose kind of
It is very
starting
much.
point, but I thought it'd be important to have that explainer out there to start. What are we talking about when you start to say having other parties' perspectives?
Perspective. I mean, obviously, perspective is how you view things, right? It's how you are seeing what's happening. It's how you feel about it. It's about the outcomes that you think. It's about how the functionality or the action should be done. The unique piece about having other perspectives is being able to put your own perspective kind of in a box, and then say, why is this important to the suppliers? I don't care about it, but why is this important to my suppliers? Why is this important to my client? Why is this important to my suppliers? Why is this important to my VMS provider? And without that ability to understand that everybody has a job to do, everybody needs to be symbiotic, and we all kind of need to have this collegial relationship to be really successful, you end up developing a society where things end up being quite unequal and uneven. And I don't know that there's a lot of growth opportunities for true, real valued partnership that can, really stand the test of time without being able to say, I understand your view, and then being able to compromise.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because, you can relate to relationships and that kind of thing like that in a personal perspective to add communication on perspectives
Mhm.
and whose truth is what. But when it comes to our industry, it's business too. So there's the personal relationships and trust built between people that can help with perspective. But that builds trust that
Mhm.
allows you to communicate perspectives
Mhm.
when, like in our business relationships, there's things like profitability,
I was just
there's
gonna say
things
dollars
like
matter.
internal policies,
Mhm.
there's timelines. Like it's more than just how are you feeling per se, like a relationship, but that's a
Mhm.
big important thing too, because some of this is emotional. Do you feel like you're being valued as a partner for what you're bringing to the table? So there is that kind of intangible, but there's a lot of tangibles that you gotta let out on the table to
You
build
too.
trust,
And I
right?
think you reach that intangible trust when you start talking about those very tangible items in a very honest and transparent way. Like when we're talking about markups, for example, is a really good thing. Clients, of course, want the lowest markups possible because they don't want to pay the money. Suppliers want the highest markups possible because they need to make money. Workers want good markups because they want to be able to make, I mean, there's a whole million different views of why markups are important. But being able to just stop and stand still for a minute and understand, we need to get this right for everybody. We need to understand the duration of the time. We need to understand the volume, the frequency, what kind of roles we're filling. How can we make this work for everybody such that it's a symbiotic relationship that can last more than 3 years? Ooh, Jeff, I can't hear you. You muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was muted there for a second. Um, so it is so important to get these out on the table, right? And often some of this, because it's profit driven and there's some salesmanship that happens in this process, it's like a poker game sometimes.
Yeah. And
And
it's hard to give that transparency when you're playing that poker game because you constantly want to be like, I can't reveal this. But I for sure have found that in the last 20 years, no matter what seat I'm in, having that authenticity and coming to the table with, I care about this because of this, I care about this because of this, and this is why this is happening. It helps people to kind of get out of their own space. And so I think that you need those intangibles and you need truth and transparency around those intangibles to really develop that kind of trust. And then it's easier to lean into somebody else's perspective.
100%. And I think, you know, the best programs tend to be the ones that have gotten over that and said, here, right? This is what our objectives are. And generally when you start to build out your program strategy, it's what are our drivers in this, right? And if you
Mhm.
can really truly jump in and say, these are our most important objectives that we want, our drivers, and be true to them and let the vendor community know that, then you're sharing as the program lead, sharing perspective,
Mhm.
right? Your perspective and your objectives. And so by offering that up, I think that's important. And then you're right on the vendor community, then okay, if those are your objectives, we're going to help you meet those, but here's our objectives. But it's hard sometimes with the vendor community. So in being transparent, when they know that could affect the evaluation process. So, why is it so important to, when you're running a program or on the vendor side, even to show your cards, right? Take down the walls, show your cards, be, you know, be truthful, say, hey, listen, we're going to be transparent. Like you've used the word transparency. And I think we're going to say that a lot in this
Yeah.
conversation
Mhm.
because the transparency builds trust.
It
And
does.
so why is it so important to let the cards down? Because a lot of program leads, right, often don't let the cards down and they hold back, and that hurts that ability to form trust and solutions on the
It
vendor
is.
side.
And I think you can't. It's almost to help somebody else see your perspectives, but in a deeper way. So it's one thing for a supplier to come to you and be like, we can't go anywhere below a 35% markup. But if I come and I'm so dear client, I can't do the 35% markup because it's a high risk payroll situation. I don't have the right insurances. Our organization is small. Whatever else the reasons are behind it, kind of coming forward and being honest about that versus just taking a hard line makes you seem like a much more reasonable person. And it opens up the conversation to be like, okay, I didn't realize that. Maybe I can do one or two. But when you just take that hard line, I think it really puts people, it takes people aback. And it's like, well, if you're, okay, I guess we're just at an impasse. And then what do you do next? Right. And that's why relationships don't last more than 3 years, right? The standard MSP, VMS contract is either 3 years or 10 years, right? There's very few that's in between. And there's a reason for that. It's because after 3 years, if you haven't built that trust, that symbiotic relationship where you do understand the perspectives of everybody in your ecosystem, it's going to go away. They're going to find somebody else who's going to meet their needs. 10 years means that you've done that. You've met that relationship. You've built it. You've shown your cards. You've really shown everybody that you have their perspectives in mind and that you're willing to compromise and come to the table with what you can. And it's that 10-year relationship, I think, that we all really, really want instead of just bouncing around every 3 years because someone's unhappy.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think it's an ecosystem. And you mentioned that. And so it starts, though, with the buy side because typically it's important to have the buy side to create an environment, right? Um, for all parties to start to take down walls and collaborate. And it's been interesting, like in our industry, there's a lot of collaboration between the ecosystem partners to a certain respect because of longevity of people in our industry, like ourselves, that we've known each other for a long time, and you trust each other, and you figure it out, and you go, okay, this is what I got to do. This is what you need. Okay, let's make sure we're all together and can go forward and provide a good solution for organizations. But failing that, where there isn't the ecosystem of partners that know each other, how do you gain perspective of all the parties in the ecosystem to make it all work? And how do you build that environment?
I mean, I think we've proven that it takes a really long time through all the implementations that we do that takes 6, 8, 9 months because it does take that long to really understand who's coming to the table with what, why it matters, why it makes a difference, and what their ultimate goals are. Um, I think, you know what, Jeff, actually, I'm sorry. I go back to the core of that question. My mind traveled.
Yeah, no problem. It's the how do you build an environment of trust between all of the moving parts, right? Because in some cases, you'll have and partners that have worked together in the past.
Mhm.
Others, you're bringing a bunch of different partners together. How do you, as on the buy side or as a vendor community, how do you build an environment of trust to
I
build
do
within
think
an ecosystem?
as a buyer, when you're doing the implementation, when you have an MSP, a VMS, and staffing providers that already know each other and have really good relationships, it automatically makes you feel okay. They know what they're doing because the buyers aren't typically in the space of contingent labor, right? Like if it's especially if it's a procurement person, they've usually been shoved into this category because they were category providers in procurement, and then suddenly they're in charge of people and purchasing people. And I think when there's that lack of knowledge, seeing a team come to you, an MSP, a VMS, a group of staffing providers, they're like, we know what we're doing and we are here to help you. What buyer would not walk away being like, yes, it's a whole team. They know what they're doing. Whew, what a relief. And so I think when you're able to form that trust, those perspectives and show other people that you understand those perspectives, it bridges confidence. It really does.
Yeah, it is true. And I find, there are more solutions providers that have worked together over the years, and it makes life easy when there's that. And then when there isn't, to be able to create that environment where you're able to start with communicating your objectives and start to say, listen, we're a team now, guys. We got to do this together and work through solutioning this as a team. I think building that environment where there's no fault or that kind of where we brainstorm in a box and can help. I think the it starts with the buyers creating that, and then or other the vendors that you're working with or a third party consulting house if you're new to the ecosystem as well that can maybe start to build an environment like that.
Yes, especially when you're talking to a buyer who has been kind of tossed into the category because they really don't know what best practices and without building that trust and having them really and truly understand that you do have their interest in heart in addition to your own, it won't work. Like the person that you're talking to, especially if they've not been in the industry before, really does have to have an understanding that you're not just in it to walk away with a buck. Right? You're in it. I've been doing this for 25 years. It's not easy. Sometimes it's terrible. I do it because I like solving problems and helping people. And I think that's the answer you'd get from most people who are in our space is we just all enjoy solving problems. But when we go to people who have no idea what they're doing and we say, this is it, this is how we do it. This is prescriptive. We've done it before. This is how we're going to do it for you here. And we're going to tell you every piece that we're going to make you do. It's off-putting. And then when you have that other conversation, VMS provider, staffing supplier, client, what's important to you? What matter? What can you give? What can you bring to the table? How can we help you? How can you help us? And I think there is some scariness in being that transparent, especially with competitors, right? Because we obviously don't want people to walk away and take our business. But I really don't feel like anybody who's in this industry is really out to screw other people. I really don't think we are. I think most of us are pretty decent human beings who are just trying to make our lives happy. And I think being able to have that symbiotic relationship with everybody is just the most important thing.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is creating a environment to have the ecosystem discuss issues with each
Exactly.
other too, and
Exactly.
being able to let go potentially
100%.
of always having to lead the discussion.
Of course, a good example is supplier forums. So when you're the MSP and you say to your client sponsor and your managers, I want to bring the suppliers in. I want them to sit and talk to you, and I want you to ask them what they're seeing that we have missed that we need to incorporate. Like, what are other people doing that are successful that we're not doing? And saying that to your client, like you don't know something, you might want somebody else's perspective, can also kind of be scary because you are showing a little bit that you don't know everything. But saying I don't know everything also engenders trust because then it's like, okay, well, she's transparent enough to say she doesn't know it. She's going to go find it and come back. And then coming back with partners who know what they're talking about, I think just solidifies it even more.
Yeah, it is amazing. And then having the ecosystem to talk to each other, I think building that environment that isn't trying to divide and conquer, right? That divide and conquer world when we're talking contingent workforce, where, if you're looking at the broader picture, you're going to have a number of strategic partners that you're going to have to deal with. Some of the times it's great to let go and let them figure it out for you, right?
Agreed.
And
I think
like
that's
you've
why we
said
all
in
go
the
to
past,
conferences.
in some cases where you see that they've worked together in the past, it just gives you, as a program owner, confidence that this will work out because people have done this before and figured things through.
For sure.
Like,
I think that's why we go to conferences. Like we go to conferences not just to meet each other and network and have a drink together, but we go because we always learn something. You always meet somebody new, you meet a new partner in the field, you go to a session where you learn something new. I had someone talk to me about the change management session they went to at the last conference we were at. It was transformative for her. So I think going to these conferences with that mindset means like we're all in this position of I want to understand more, I want to do more, and I want to be able to do more for my partners.
yeah, no, and it's so important. And once again, getting back to the main theme, perspective, right? I think it's sharing information, but then also sharing perspectives on, how are the companies doing? How does the commercials work? Timelines? Because, being able to share as much as possible across the ecosystem, I often think of a program like a house, right? If you're building a house, you need to line up the plumber, the framer, the plumber, the electrician, the roofer, the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And having perspectives on capacity, having perspective on pricing, having perspective on different things will allow you to kind of line these things up properly. And if you're communicating your perspectives, then your ecosystem can align to that too when it comes to capacity. Oh, shoot, I'm going to be under capacity when you need something. I'm going to build capacity to support you, right?
Agreed.
And
And
if
I,
it's all last minute, then that's when sometimes things get out of sorts
right. I mean,
because
the
you
analogy
haven't
that kind of
shared your perspectives and thoughts.
the analogy that's coming to mind for me as you're talking through like buying a house is, you're buying the house with your perspective in mind. This is the house I want. These are the things I need in it. These are the partners I'm going to bring in to build this house because this is what I need. Versus buying a house that already exists. It stands. So from my perspective, a big giant mansion with 17 floors and 45 rooms and a big giant yard would be amazing. I, however, have had 5 knee surgeries, so I wouldn't be able to walk up and down all those stairs. So
Yeah.
from my perspective, that's how. But it's a great, beautiful thing anyway. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means it's not for me. And I think we also have a lot of that negativity that comes when someone else's perspective is different or against yours. It isn't bad, it's just different.
Yeah. Well,
So
and the
when we
interesting part, and the word different came to mind. The cool and interesting thing, like you've also said, you love to solve problems, that there is not one program that is identical. Not identical stakeholders, not identical volume, not identical types of people that they're bringing to the organization, culture, location. Like when you think about what we do, everything is different. And I think there's perspective gained by taking your time as well and really doing the work up front to understand that need. So, like the house analogy, yes, you'd love the gold-plated program, and you'd love to get it tomorrow with a big bang approach that you just stand it up immediately. But that may not be your reality. So it may be important to work with your partners to understand what you don't know, go find that information to give them the company's perspective as well. It's not just individual perspective, it's your company and your organization's readiness to implement a type of program. And it may be not a big bang, let's stand it up immediately approach. It may be a slow burn where you need to do some research, have a light touch, implement different things. So, we kind of almost put it in this individual or small business and your ecosystem perspective, but you also, a big part of this is as a program lead is to understand the organization's readiness or
Exactly.
perspective on readiness.
And what you see and what they've seen might not be what's going to work for them. So I think almost everybody I've talked to have seen like really large programs that are run by, 4,000 resources and, 17 teams worth of people that are helping to manage those programs. And when you're a buyer that's in this space looking at these big programs, like I don't want to name one specifically, but my last program that I managed internally was a big one. It was big inside the United States. Um, and it worked for that organization because they needed 100 suppliers. They needed really, really low markups because we were hiring hundreds of people per month. That model, that perspective, it's not going to work for a small 500 person rare disease company. It's just not going to. So you really do have to kind of lean into understand, like anticipating what a perspective might be when you're going and talking to a client, a buyer, a supplier, and then standing on, I know that this works for some people, but it might not work for everybody. And I have to be creative and find the right answer in between.
So, how is trust built? I know we talked about it a little bit. And I think earlier in the conversation, transparency, openness, that kind of thing. But, is there more to it? Or is it like how do we build more trust in our ecosystem and build that environment?
For me, I think it's the time. I think it's the time and the willingness to put effort into something, even if it doesn't immediately benefit you. And I think some of the best relationships that I've had over the last 20 years have been ones that have been mutually maintained because we have taken the time to have conversations, to talk about each other's perspectives. And even without the opportunity of doing business together, like Jeff, you and I have known each other for what, 10
Yeah.
years?
Yeah.
I don't know that we're ever going to be able to do business together. But
Yeah.
the point is, I like your perspective. I want to understand where you're coming from. I want to understand your viewpoint. And I think that consistently tending to those relationships over time, even if they've been dusty for a year or so, tending to those relationships over time and bringing your own value into it without necessarily expecting that you're going to get something in return is really what takes it across the finish line and doing it consistently for a very long time.
And trust usually speeds up ability to implement, right? Because it breaks down the walls that often get in between the players that allow us to give each
Yes.
other perspectives because we trust each other.
100%. And then when you're talking to a potential client, as the lens that I've had in my background, I've been able to say to buyers, like, this is going to be important to me, but you need to think about this because your organization is here and this is going to be important to you. So we really need to think about X, Y, and Z. So even though it might never be my truth, the fact that this person has known me all these years and now I'm coming to them and saying this is something you really need to consider, they take it more seriously. And so it makes the sale easier, it makes the program operation easier, it makes just everything a better mutually beneficial arrangement.
Yeah. No, it's amazing perspective. And I think that is one of the nuggets of gold that people may not realize in our industry is trust has been built on showing up consistently throughout the years. And honestly, brands change, but people have been showing up consistently, and that builds that trust between the players that allows for ease of business to happen, which has been really interesting. Even as new players enter in, a lot of the same people are working for those new players that help them accelerate into our ecosystem here,
Sure.
which is unbelievable. So that's one nugget of gold is that trust and how to build trust. Um, what are some of the others? I always love to end this, and I think we could talk forever. I always
Probably.
like, I love your perspective, but I always end with, hey, and you've been in the seat, a program lead. If I'm taking on something new and I want to build an
Oh, no, I lost you.
environment of trust between my ecosystem of vendors, etc., how do what are some of the nuggets of gold, like early wins that I could help to build this environment of trust and perspective?
Mhm. I think we've moved our programs into a space where we've removed all of the value add pennies, right? So like anytime a buyer wants you to do something extra, it's well, let's get an SOW in place because it's going to cost money. And that's because we've no longer left dollars in the program to make value add happen. It's just gone. But I think that that value add without the dollars is really helpful. So for just this week, for example, we have rate material. So we pay for a market rate subscription. And I've had a couple buyers that have been interested. And I'm like, let me send you some reports. I'm not going to charge you anything. I don't expect anything. I'm not giving you anything else, but it's definitely IP that I've paid for that I'm now freely sharing
Yeah.
as a good effort, a good faith effort. Same thing, like I'll write an article, I write commission like communication plans for potential clients because it's a huge pain that they don't want to do. And suddenly when I've shown up with giant communication plans for them ready made, wow, what a value. And I don't always know that that's going to work. And I might have put 5 or 6 hours of my time into it, maybe 10 or 15, but it's the value. Show something of value to show that you've got skin in the game and that you're not just there to make the dollar and that's it.
Yeah. Although those are important things from a vendor perspective. And from a program lead perspective, I think be open to them, your vendor, because they are able to provide that value add and guide you through some of this. If, you know, there's good vendors and there are some less than good vendors, but I think you'll be quickly able to identify your vendor community, where the people that you can start to build trust with and gain that perspective and thoughts on building an open, transparent relationship. So, you know, I to get that value add, I think part of it is you have to provide something to your vendor community as well.
I agree. And I think giving them the opportunity to cross that line, that MSP line, and actually look at your client and speak to your client, I think there's no better way to show them that you have trust, you have stake in the game, and you really want a symbiotic relationship between everybody. I think programs that are so intensely safeguarded, I think it really does hurt the vendor relationship when you don't actually get them in front of your clients because they don't really understand what the client wants then, and the clients have no visibility into who's actually supporting them. And I get that MSPs get threatened by that. I do. I'm an MSP. But I think that ultimately it helps to grow and build the program. And I think that holding on to things so tightly as their own and you don't want to share is detrimental.
Yeah, and I think that's the nugget of gold is to create, you got to start somewhere to create openness. I think maybe give some guidelines, so understand the rules and work if you do have an MSP in place, talk to them about this openness strategy because I think there's value add and it just doesn't all funnel through you. And if you feel threatened, figure it out where there's some rules in place where it just doesn't create chaos. It creates, openness to discuss best practices. And I think, supplier forums, like you've mentioned in the past, are also a great way to do that because
Mhm.
it you know comes together in a non-threatening manner where you can discuss ideas and gain perspectives. So,
Agreed.
um,
The last thing I'll say probably is don't be afraid to say no. Like
yeah,
if something is being asked of you and it's not in your wheelhouse, it's not up your alley, just because you want the business, don't say yes because you're going to do it badly. You're not going to do it as well as another partner would do. And saying to somebody, it's not truly my wheelhouse, and I feel like somebody over at this supplier would do this just a little bit better. Let me get them in touch with you. Wow. Does that show that you're confident in what you do or what?
yeah.
So don't be
I
afraid to say
totally
no.
believe that. Yeah. It's so important. And that furthers the trust where you can then understand everybody's perspectives. So I appreciate your time
Thank you
today,
for having me.
Megan.
This was
It's been
great.
an amazing conversation. And I think it's a very important topic to create an environment that allows people to share their perspectives and understand, timelines, budgets, profitability. if everybody starts to align things, you may not get the puzzle perfect, but it'll be better than holding your cards tight and not gaining each other's perspectives.
Never going to come together otherwise.
Amazing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff, for the time. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.